The next thing you've got to be thinking about at an assessment centre is your interview. And there are a few things that you can do to prepare yourself to put the best foot forward in an interview. First thing, fairly obvious, but dress smart. I'd always argue dress a little bit smarter than you think you need to. It's always better to err on the side of caution, and you are not going to be marked down for dressing smarter than you needed to on the day. It's always better to be early, whether it's online or in person. It puts a good impression across and stops you from feeling flustered. So try and aim for 15 minutes earlier than you need to be, just to put your mind at ease. Whether it's in person or online, you need to be engaged throughout the day. This means your webcam needs to stay on, you need to keep positive eye contact, and you need to stay engaged and listening to what the other person is saying. Don't just revert back to a script that you've prepared. And beforehand, prepare some materials. It's absolutely fine to take notes. It's fine to take the research that you've done prior to the day, and this can give you a level of confidence that can make you really stand out at interview. Now, during the interview, you actually have a little bit of a cheat sheet. We have more information on the interview itself, how to give a good answer, in our dedicated interviews playlist, but just to give you an overview, this is what you should be using to answer interview questions. It's called the STAR technique. So imagine you're asked something like, give me an example of a time you have demonstrated strong communication skills, let's say. You break it down with STAR. STAR stands for situation, task, action and result. So the situation, when was the last time you used that skill? The task, what were you trying to achieve? The action, the most important part, what did you do and how did you do it? And then the result, what happened as a result of what you did. Now, as I say, we have more information on this in our dedicated interview playlist, but to give you some tips all the way through when you are giving this answer, be as specific as possible and give a level of detail that almost feels a little bit embarrassing. We want you to quantify and qualify. Treat the interviewer as though they have no idea what you're talking about and go over the basics. That demonstrates you know what you're talking about. Try and avoid, wherever possible, saying we. You need to relate it to what you did, what your contribution was, so I is always better. And include things like impact and what you learned, potentially in the result, what you would have done differently having gone through it. And all the way through, be as positive as you can to demonstrate that impact. This is how you'll be giving a really good interview answer. All the way through your answers, you need to be thinking about the key skills they're looking for. These will be taken from the job description, taken from the person specification. You'll have seen this in the preparation you've done. But think about the key skills they're asking for and demonstrate those. Put them into your answers. This is really important because of how the interview will actually be assessed. When you're being interviewed, essentially, you are being scored. And they'll be using something like this that I've got on the screen called a selection grid. So they will listen to your answer and literally give it a numerical score based on what you've said. On here I've used 1 to 5, it might be 1 to 4, 1 to 10. It really doesn't matter, but what they'll be looking for is, what does this answer give me? How much does it demonstrate the specific skill we've asked for? So when you are giving these examples, when you're answering these questions, be quite critical with yourselves and think, what score am I getting for this answer? Am I relatively confident that I'm getting a 4 or a 5 or whatever it might be? That's why the level of detail is so important. They won't assume any knowledge on your part, so you have to give them the basics to demonstrate that you know what those basics are. Now, the last thing you'll have to think about is the group exercise. I have an example on here. It could be any number of things. It might be something that we presented here. It might be something like make an actual business decision with the group that you're in. It might be prepare a presentation. It might even be answer a group email. It doesn't really matter. What they are trying to get a handle on is how you actually work as part of a group of people that you've never met before. It is not about you taking necessarily a domineering leadership role. It's not about you demonstrating that you are the strongest or most vocal candidate. It's more about how you interact with other people. So focus, yes, on your own individual contribution, but how that contribution affects the group. How are you helping the group? How are you helping the group complete whatever task that they've set you? Always keep that task in mind and keep the time limits in mind. You will always be given a specific time limit to hit, and you will not be allowed to go over that. A really valuable contribution, thinking of that, is potentially a timekeeper for the group, and you can designate yourself, I will keep time for this, and keep reminding people, we only have 10 minutes left, we only have 5 minutes left, do we have enough time to get to what we need to achieve, or do we need to speed things up? Things like that, thinking about what your contribution to the overall group is what we're after in a group exercise. I will say this does take a bit of practice, whether it's the group exercise that I've just talked about, the interview, all of it. In semester 2, we will be running a series of example and practice assessment centres, both in person and online. So if this is something that you are keen to practice, please do keep an eye out for those on Career Connect, or just get in touch with the team and we'll be able to tell you how you can practice all of these things. And when it comes to actually performing on the day, here's what students tell us. Really important to stay calm and remember you are not in direct competition with the other candidate. It's not to see who is the best candidate in a sort of Hunger Games way. It's more to think about, how do you interact with people that you've not met before? How do you work as part of a team? This is really important, so don't worry too much about putting so much pressure on yourself to stand out as much as you can. Do the simple things, prepare, make sure you know your route, dress well, think about your overall contribution to those group tasks. It's easily said, but relax and be yourself as much as possible. A really useful way of thinking about, particularly an assessment centre, is that while yes, you are on show and it can be easy to feel judged and feel that pressure, reverse it a little. This is very much a two-way street. Yes, they are deciding whether they want to employ you, but you are also deciding whether you want to work for them. You do have power in this situation, so think about the things that you want to see from them that will convince you to work for them. That will also inform the questions you want to ask after the interview. And don't forget as well that this is a learning experience. Don't be afraid to think about it in hindsight and think, okay, maybe I didn't do so well at one specific aspect, whether it was the interview, the group task, or the psychometric test, whatever it is. What do I need to get better at? What mistakes did I make? And try and get feedback from these days as much as possible as well. All of which brings us to the end of this section and the entire playlist. Thank you very much for listening. I really hope that's been helpful. We have covered quite a lot in some detail, but there's a lot more detail on things like the interviews, the psychometric tests, applications, all sorts of things on the rest of the YouTube channel. So if you do want that little bit of extra detail for those aspects, please do watch those playlists. They can be really helpful. And if you do want to get in touch, our contact details are on the screen. And as always, if you can like, subscribe so that we can grow the channel and reach more students, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you soon.